Did you know a federal judge just refused to stop the Trump administration from moving forward with border wall construction along tribal land in Arizona, setting up a high-stakes clash over sovereignty, federal power, and the reach of immigration enforcement? According to the Associated Press, U.S. District Judge Richard Leon ruled on August 14, 2026, that the administration can keep taking steps toward building 62 miles of international border wall along part of the Tohono O'odham Nation's reservation without the tribe's consent. The decision is a major setback for the tribe, which had asked the court for an emergency halt. For now, the wall work continues, and the legal fight moves forward under the shadow of a deeply contested border policy. The core of the case is straightforward, but the stakes are not. The Tohono O'odham Nation argued that the wall would cut through reservation land and deepen the impact of a long-running federal push to harden the U.S.-Mexico border. The tribe sought a court-ordered block on the project, saying the government should not be allowed to advance construction on its land without tribal approval. Judge Leon declined to grant that relief. In his ruling, he said the tribe had not shown that the wall would actually change the reservation's boundaries without congressional authority. He also rejected the tribe's trespass claim, and in weighing the evidence, he concluded that the government's interests in border security, immigration enforcement, and public safety outweighed the remaining claims of irreparable harm at this stage. That reasoning matters because it puts two powerful ideas in direct conflict. On one side is the federal government's broad authority over borders and immigration. On the other is tribal sovereignty, which is supposed to protect the right of indigenous nations to govern their own lands and defend them from unwanted intrusion. The Tohono O'odham Nation has spent years warning that wall construction is not just a political symbol. It is a physical barrier that can divide communities, restrict movement, and alter a landscape that has been home to the tribe for generations. To supporters of the project, however, the issue is national security. They argue that the government has a duty to control the border, stop illegal crossings, and reduce risks tied to trafficking, smuggling, and other criminal activity. That is the basic divide in this case. Supporters of the wall frame it as a practical tool. They say the administration is acting within its responsibility to secure the border and enforce the law. They argue that a barrier in this area can help slow unauthorized entry and create a more manageable enforcement zone. In that view, the wall is not a symbolic gesture, but a physical measure tied to public safety. Judge Leon echoed that logic in part, writing that the government's interests in securing the border, enforcing immigration laws, and protecting the public outweighed the tribe's surviving claims of harm at this stage of the case. Critics see something very different. They view the project as another example of the federal government treating indigenous land as a corridor to be managed rather than a homeland to be respected. For them, the issue is not just where the wall goes, but who gets to decide. The Tohono O'odham Nation says it should not have to watch construction proceed on reservation land without consent. Critics also argue that once a wall is built, the damage is not abstract or temporary. Even if the legal fight continues later, the land, access routes, cultural sites, and daily life of the community may already be altered in ways that cannot be undone. This is why the case reaches far beyond one stretch of desert. It touches federal power, indigenous rights, environmental concerns, and the broader politics of border enforcement. Border wall construction has long been one of the most visible and divisive elements of U.S. immigration policy. But when the project moves across tribal land, the stakes become even more layered. The question is no longer only whether the border should be hardened. It is also whether the federal government can do so in a way that overrides the objections of a sovereign indigenous nation. That is why this ruling is being watched so closely. It may influence not just this one project, but how courts handle future conflicts between border infrastructure and tribal authority. The human impact is immediate and difficult to measure with legal language alone. For members of the Tohono O'odham Nation, the reservation is not an abstract map boundary. It is where people live, travel, work, pray, and maintain ties to family and heritage. A wall can change access to land and reshape everyday life. It can complicate movement across areas that were once open. It can add enforcement pressure to communities already living with the constant presence of border policy. And it can intensify a sense of being caught between competing federal priorities, with local residents carrying the consequences either way. There is also the broader emotional weight of this fight. When a tribe asks a court to stop construction on its land, and the court says no, that decision lands as more than a procedural ruling. It signals that, at least for now, the government's border agenda is legally stronger than the tribe's attempt to pause it. For people on the ground, that can mean uncertainty, frustration, and a feeling that the next phase is already arriving before their objections have been fully heard. What happens next will likely depend on appeals, the pace of construction, and whether the tribe pursues additional legal strategies. Watch for whether the Tohono O'odham Nation challenges the ruling in higher court, whether construction advances quickly, and whether any environmental or administrative issues slow the project down. Also watch for evidence of broader precedent. If this ruling stands, it could shape how future courts balance tribal sovereignty against federal border powers in similar cases. In a broader sense, this is not just about one wall segment. It is about how far the federal government can go when national security claims collide with indigenous rights and local control. Bottom line, Judge Richard Leon's ruling clears the way for now for the Trump administration to keep pursuing 62 miles of border wall work along part of the Tohono O'odham Nation's reservation in Arizona. The legal fight is not over, but the immediate result is clear. The administration's border and immigration interests won this round, while the tribe's push to halt construction without consent was denied. And that makes this one of the clearest current tests of where border enforcement ends and tribal sovereignty begins. Trump News. Donald Trump. On breaking news. On U.S. politics. On border wall. On border news. On court news. On tribal sovereignty. On Tohono O'odham. On Arizona. The news. On immigration news. On Did You Now. On news shorts. On YouTube shorts. On TikTok news. On Watchmen style. On hypernatural AI. Cinematic attention.